The giveaway for the free gallery airbrush is still going on the TSMC web shop. Order number 25 will be the lucky winner of this airbrush, so be quick, place your orders, and maybe you will win this one for free. Most of the interior reference photos I found online were of a black, maybe a little bit of a gray interior, and I thought that would be a little bit too boring, so I decided to go for one that stuck out to me, and that is a red and black combination. Now this exact combo was not available online, so I just configured something I think I would like myself, and that is doing some of the center parts of the seats and some of the more pronounced parts of the front seats in red, along with some pieces of the door cards, and then doing the rest in a nice black to tone it down just a little bit, with a nice highlight of a red steering wheel too. So initially the parts were sanded down with some 600 grit, then primed with Street Blisters Gray Primer, painted red with a Ferrari red just randomly, and then once that was cured I could mask it all off carefully and start painting all of the flat black with some Tamiya lacquer paints. Some of the other interior bits for the dashboard were also painted at the same time with a nice gunmetal, and then the rest of it was pretty much done, apart from some small details that were added with a brush later on. So in the last episode I finished painting the exterior. That now had about a week of cure time, so I could move on to masking that off as well, so I can paint all the black trim on the roof and also surrounding the windows and some of the cowling underneath the window wipers, and do that with some black paints from Tamiya too, just airbrushing it on and then removing the masking tape once it was all completed. The base of the interior needed some carpet flocking as well, so I just painted that with some semi-gloss black from a spray can, and while the paint was still fully wet I put the flocking on top of it and let that cure. In the meantime I moved on to adding some additional details with some silvers and some black to all of the other interior pieces. Now that all of the detail painting has been completed, I could move on to doing some assembly and also adding some decals. In order to finish the details on the interior off, I decided to add some seatbelt material and also use the seatbelt buckles that were included with the kit from Alpha Model. Now that both of the front seats are glued in place, it was time to finish off the interior by putting in the door panels and then sliding the rest of the interior in place too. But before that I ran into a little bit of a problem, and that was the dashboard itself. Now, since there are very basic and bare bones instructions included with these kits, sometimes you just have to figure something out or some things out yourself the hard way. In this case, the door panels were both glued in place and the dashboard was supposed to be slid in from on top according to the instructions. Now, that probably couldn't be further from the truth. I think the dashboard needed to be put in place first, and then you somehow would need to finagle both of the door panels in as well from the inside, none of which would be really easy to do as it is a tight fit already. But by the way that I did it, it did need a little bit of touch-up. Now, nothing major, but it was a little bit of a frustrating point as it clearly was not stated very well in the instructions on how to do it, and the way that was stated in the instructions was pretty much dead wrong. Now again, nothing major, but just a little bit of a letdown. One thing that I also didn't really notice in the instructions was that you needed to put in the front mesh grille for the main big piece first, and then later on slide in the radiator or intercooler setup, and then add the front splitter. I did all of the things that I just mentioned except for sliding in that radiator mesh, so that was a little bit of a cut and shut at the end, as I just simply needed to cut it in order for it to fit through the hole, and then I could put it in place and just glue it there. It's not perfect, but most of it can't be seen anyway. Also, speaking of little things that could be a little bit annoying, those taillight housings themselves were a little bit warped and therefore didn't perfectly fit in place, so it needed a lot of glue and a lot of force to be stuck in place, but once stuck in place that was pretty much good. And then the taillight lenses could be fit on top of it later once those were ready. Now, since the car already had a lot of gloss black accents on the front and rear bumper, and also of course the main roof and the mirrors, I didn't want to do gloss black wheels as well, so I decided to go with gunmetal. I've mentioned this in one of my previous build videos. I'm putting in the mesh grills first and then painting them later so I don't get any nasty splinters or paint tear-offs during the process of installation, and just brushing some paint on afterwards. Now, I will be trying just to paint them beforehand with some better metal primers and metal paints in the future, but for now this does work really nicely and gives a nice clean result. Some small black accent pieces were added to the rear taillights as well. These small fins were a little bit too big, so they will need a little bit of sanding just to make them a little narrower to fit in place a lot better. But overall, a really nice detail and something very cool and specific to the wagon version of the Evo. During the installation of the side windows, there was a small oversight on my part, and I added some glue where it clearly should not have been, and that cannot be removed as it's already on the pillar and also on the glass. Now, I'm kind of confused as there is a pretty big pillar but no black edge on the clear parts themselves to go on top of it. So is that a mistake in the kit, or is that simply just how it is supposed to be? Do let me know down in the comments below, and if you're building one of these for yourselves, do not add glue in that section as that will remain visible. So on the fully 3D printed build video I did on a modern interpretation of the Toyota GT86, or more the initial D86, I painted it white and added some black panel line color to the panel lines, and that was a bit too obvious, and some of you suggested in the comments that I should use gray panel lines on a white car. So I did, and it does look a lot better than going fully black, a lot more downstated and suiting better for the build overall. I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. Like my styling choices myself, of course, I made them, so I better like them. The headlights were a bit too silvery, so maybe something for another Evo I will be building in the future. I'm going to be changing that to more of a black, but then again, this is the standard headlight that is pretty much fully silver, so not too bad. And overall, I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. Some small mistakes here and there, but overall, nothing too bad.